So the key here is to never, ever, ever trust user input. One of the great idioms of web security is filter input, escape output. And we'll do just that by using some very helpful PDO methods. Let's take a look at how we can use the prepare and binding to filter our input.
Now we should know not to trust user input. So we're going to need to do a lot here, but filter. Let's get rid of all of this because it's ugly. We'll do back to our ID 555, which is Mallrats United. Okay, so first step here is to make sure that this is an integer. Now, we're not going to really do any crazy validation on this. We're just going to force this to be an integer because we're expecting an ID. So I'll actually use the built-in function int_val, and then we'll do, let's see, val, and then open and close our parents here. Save that, and now whatever we type in here, if we do 555, whatever, and then hit enter, we'll actually get just the integers, the first section of it. So that's 55, I believe. Let's get rid of that. And yes, that's correct, 55. If I was to say ADDD and then another 5, again, it's just taking the first bit. So gets rid of all of the string characters there. We'll get rid of all of those. And then just go back to our 555. Okay, Mallrats United. Now that we've done that little bit of forcing it to an integer by using the int_val function, the next step is we want to actually use what's built into the PDO object or to the PDO class to tidy up SQL injection by preparing our statements. So let's go over here and we'll do a search for the PDO class again. All right, first one, class PDO. I'm going to scroll down here, and we have 2 or 3 things that we need to look into. The first one is prepare. Let's look at the docs for PDO prepare. Now, this method prepares a statement for execution and returns a statement object. So looking a little bit further here, we can see that the argument that it receives that is required is the statement. If you read the first paragraph, it says that it's going to be prepared to executed by the execute method. Okay, so that's our next method that we're going to call. So this is going to help us with the SQL injection by making sure that only the statement we want to run gets run. So anything tagged onto the end of it will not work. So we'll do a prepare statement first by putting our statement inside of it. So let's do that by going over to our code. And we are going to replace what's down here on the DB query with DB prepare. Okay. Now, the only caveat here is that now we have a film ID that we want to pass through. So we're not going to be able to do that here. What we're going to use is a placeholder, and that placeholder is a question mark. So we need to get the film ID from line 6 down here to this placeholder that's on line 11 before we run our execute command. We're going to do that by using another method, and then finally on line 13, we'll actually run our execute. I'm going to go ahead and type the execute statement in now. If we go back up to the manual, we click on execute, you'll see that it only needs input parameters if we want them. But for right now, we're not going to use them. So we'll go back here. All right, we'll do that by calling the results object, all right, LTS, object operator to execute. Okay, now going back to the docs for execute, if we click on it, you'll see that it says execute the prepared statement. If the prepared statement included parameter markers, you must either call bind param or pass an array. Well, so we're not going to pass an array. We're going to actually use bind param or bind value. We can use either one. So let's click on bind param and take a look at that. It binds a parameter to the specified variable name, and it's got 2 arguments here that are required. The first is the parameter, which is a mixed type, and the second is a variable. We already know what our variable is going to be, which is going to be our film ID that we retrieved from the URL. But what is the mixed parameter here? So if we look at parameter, it says that the parameter identifier for a prepared statement using named placeholders, it'll be the name, or if it's using question mark placeholders, it'll be the one indexed position. Okay, so like arrays are 0-based, we want a 1-based index because we're using the question mark placeholder. So we'll actually use the bind param method. We'll do $results and then object operator to bind and then capital P and param. Right, and we'll open and close our parents. Now, we know that the first argument is supposed to be a 1-indexed number that represents the placement of the question mark in our prepared statement. We only have one question mark, and it's 1-indexed, so the number 1. Then a comma to separate the arguments, and then our variable that we want to bind to that question mark. So in our case, it's $film_ID, which we set on line 6. So just as a review, we are getting the result set and putting it into a prepared statement. We're using a placeholder of question mark. Then we're binding that question mark or that parameter to our film ID, which comes from our URL on line 6. Then finally, we run the execute command on line 13, or the execute method, which will actually create our results object that has everything in it. Now, when we run execute, does execute return something to us? So let's go up here and take a look back one to our execute. It's going to return to us a Boolean, which is a true on success or a false on failure. Okay, we can test for that for sure, but for now, we just know that it's returning our result set to the actual results object. So we should still be able to use the code that exists on line 19, as well as our code that exists on the bottom here on line 39. So make sure our file is saved, and then click our preview icon. Okay, so now we have our films by title, just like before. This is the index.php file. I'm going to click on number 9 here, Alabama Devil. And then it'll say films by ID equal to 9 Alabama Devil. But we should not be able to paste in our SQL injection code here. We should just be able to enter in numbers and get the ID that we expect. So we'll go back one, Alabama Devil ID 9. I'm going to take the actual code that was the SQL injection from before, and then I'm going to take that and paste it back in to see what result we get now. Paste this in, hit enter, and then now it's returning nothing to us. Well, that's fine because it's not giving us a valid ID, but it's also not dumping back, which is exactly right. So if I was to enter in something that doesn't exist, say 1000 or 10,001 will work, hit enter, it still returns nothing. So let's clean that up a little bit, and that should get us to where we want to be for right now.